The hallway was almost empty when he left the meeting room, walking too fast for a man who had always been seen as calm and composed. The glass doors still reflected fragments of the meeting that had just ended. Harsh stares, cutting remarks, numbers that didn't add up, a heavy silence that spoke louder than any explicit disapproval. For the first time since taking over the company, the young millionaire tasted the bitter taste of failure. His cell phone vibrated with messages he didn't want to read. His footsteps echoed on the impeccable floor, and his perfectly aligned blue tie seemed tighter than usual. Then, as he turned the corner, everything happened in a second. A sharp impact, a simple coffee cup flying through the air, dark stains spreading across the light floor. He stopped abruptly. In front of him, kneeling almost immediately, was the company's cleaning lady in a simple red uniform, her hands trembling as she tried to clean up her own mistake that wasn't a mistake. "Excuse me, sir. I didn't see," she said hurriedly, even though it was he who had been distracted. He instinctively bent down to help, and in that gesture, two worlds on the same level, hands almost touching on the floor, he perceived something no one had ever noticed before. A tear fell silently from her face, mingling with the spilled coffee. She tried to hide it, took a deep breath, but it was too late. He saw. And in that instant, in the midst of the worst day of his career, the young millionaire felt something unexpected. Not curiosity, not immediate attraction, but a deep, almost painful unease for never having seen that woman before. His failure, the coffee on the floor, the silence of the hallway, everything seemed to conspire for an encounter that shouldn't have happened, but that would change both their lives forever. Before we delve into this amazing story, tell me which city and state you're watching from. Leave a comment and I'll reply with gratitude. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like this video. We want to share more stories like this. She remained kneeling on the floor, wiping the stain with excessive speed, as if erasing it meant disappearing along with her. The coffee was no longer there, but the insistent gesture betrayed something beyond mere cleaning. The young millionaire realized this even before he finished bending down. He had learned from a young age to read reports, numbers, and expressions in tough meetings, but he had never stopped to observe someone who lived in that same building every day without being seen. The silence in the hallway seemed louder than any discussion he had just faced in the boardroom. He extended his hand to help her up, but she refused with a quick, almost automatic movement, as if she had already learned not to take up space. She said again that everything was fine, that she would clean it up, that he could go ahead. The way she avoided looking directly into his eyes deeply disturbed him. He stood up slowly, not out of haste, but because he felt he needed to choose each movement carefully. He asked if she was all right. The question came out simply, almost timidly, unlike the firm tone he usually used with directors and investors. She replied that, yes, everything was fine, but her voice was too low to convince. When she finally raised her face, he saw her red eyes, the visible effort to maintain her composure. That struck him in a strange way. He, who had just lost millions in a bad decision, felt that that loss didn't hurt as much as realizing that someone was crying silently a few meters from his office every day. She stood up, adjusted the cleaning cart, and tried to walk down the hallway as if the encounter were of no importance whatsoever. But he couldn't simply leave. He called her again, asking her name. She hesitated before answering. Surprised to be addressed in that way, she said her name quickly, almost as if afraid of doing something wrong simply by speaking. He repeated the name in a low voice, as if trying to memorize it. The respectful way he pronounced it made her look at him for a few more seconds. For the first time, not as the owner of the company, but as a confused man, visibly tired, carrying the weight of something he didn't know how to bear. She explained, without going into details, that she had just overheard something she shouldn't have. Comments from employees laughing at the cleaning lady who spilled coffee, saying she should be more careful if she wanted to keep her job. She didn't say who they were. She didn't accuse anyone. She just recounted it like someone already used to swallowing this kind of thing in silence. The young millionaire felt a knot forming in his stomach. That company, which he proudly called modern, humane, and inclusive, had corridors full of hidden laughter and disguised contempt. And he had never noticed. He apologized. Not a formal apology, but something simple and direct, saying he was very sorry that it had happened there. She tried to brush it off, saying that's just how it is, that it wasn't a big deal, that she was used to it. It was that phrase that hit him the hardest. I'm used to it. He thought about how many times in his life he had normalized things that shouldn't be normal. How many times he had walked straight past corridors like that, worried only about deadlines and targets. For the first time that day, he felt that the failure of the meeting wasn't the biggest problem he needed to face. His cell phone vibrated again in his jacket pocket, insistently. He ignored it. He said he needed to go, but first asked if she would be all right. She nodded with a slight, polite smile, that practiced smile of someone who needs to appear grateful even when no one has been unfair enough to apologize. He took a few steps, then stopped. He looked back and saw her pushing the cart, picking up small, invisible pieces of paper from the spotless floor. He wanted to go back to say something more, but he didn't know what. That feeling followed him to the elevator. During the walk upstairs, he couldn't concentrate on anything. The steel doors reflected his image. Impeccable suit, firm posture, a face too young for the pressure he carried. But inside, something was out of place. The image of her kneeling, cleaning up a mistake that wasn't hers, kept returning. When the doors opened, he stepped out, crossed another corridor, and entered his office. He sat in the oversized chair, looked out the window at the city, and realized that, for the first time, that office seemed empty. Meanwhile, she went about her shift as usual. She cleaned rooms that would never be hers, corridors where important people passed without seeing her, bathrooms that reflected a luxury far removed from her reality. But that day's encounter wouldn't leave her mind, not because he owned the company, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone had stopped. Someone had asked her name. That unsettled her more than the laughter she'd heard minutes before. She didn't know whether to be happy or scared. She had the experience to know that, in that kind of place, unexpected encounters almost never ended well. At the end of her shift, she changed in the simple locker room, carefully folded her red uniform, and left through the side door of the building, the same one she always used to avoid running into executives and visitors. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken, and the city's activity remained indifferent. She was walking towards the bus stop when she heard someone call her name. She turned slowly. It was him. No suit now, jacket thrown over his arm, shirt slightly unbuttoned, a tired but determined expression. He said he had been looking for her, that he needed to talk a little more. She hesitated, her whole body on alert. She asked if she had done something wrong. He immediately denied it. He said he just wanted to thank her. "Thank you for what?" she asked, confused. He took a deep breath before answering. He said that the encounter had made him realize things he had been ignoring for too long, that the failed meeting, the lost project, all of that seemed small compared to what he had seen in the hallway. She listened in silence, unsure how to react. No one had ever put such big words to something that, for her, had always been just surviving. He said he didn't want to seem intrusive, that he understood if she didn't want to talk, but that he needed to say that that tear on the floor had changed his day. Her heart raced. She wasn't used to being seen that way. She answered carefully, saying she hadn't done anything special, that she was just working. He disagreed, with quiet firmness. He said that doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, is always special. There was a comfortable silence between them, broken only by the distant sound of cars. She finally smiled genuinely, a small, restrained, but sincere smile. In that instant, without promises, without declared intentions, something began to blossom. It wasn't love yet. It was recognition, and that for both of them was more than enough to change everything. He didn't leave immediately after that after-work meeting. He stood there for a few seconds, watching her walk away towards the bus stop, as if he wanted to make sure that moment hadn't just been a reflection of the day's tiredness or failure. There was something different about him now. It wasn't enthusiasm, nor immediate romantic hope, but a persistent, almost unsettling discomfort at realizing how much he had lived surrounded by people without ever truly seeing anyone. He went home that night in silence, without turning on the radio, without answering messages, reliving every detail of the hallway, the spilled coffee, the tear she tried to hide. For the first time in a long time, he slept badly, not because of numbers or contracts, but because of a person whose name he repeated mentally, as if he were afraid of forgetting it. The next day, he arrived at the company earlier than usual. He walked through the corridors with a different perspective, noticing things that had always been there but had never caught his attention. Ignored greetings, glances that automatically averted, doors that separated worlds within the same building. When he saw her again, pushing the cleaning cart, he felt the same tightness in his chest. She greeted him politely, a slight nod, ready to continue without creating any awkwardness. He responded in the same way, respecting her space, but something invisible had already been established between them. It wasn't intimacy, it was care. The days passed, and the encounters became quietly frequent, unplanned, unforced. Sometimes in the elevator, sometimes in the hallway, sometimes just a simple good morning, exchanged with more attention than usual. He realized he awaited those small moments with an anxiety he had never felt before, not because he needed her, but because those instants reminded him of who he could be outside the constant pressure of controlling everything. She, in turn, felt conflicted. Part of her enjoyed that simple, respectful attention, unlike anything she had ever experienced. Another part protected herself, remembering that stories like this rarely ended well for people like her. It was on a rainy afternoon that the barrier began to crumble. She was cleaning an empty room when he entered without noticing. They were both startled. He apologized, laughed awkwardly, and asked if he could stay for a few minutes. He said he needed to think. She nodded, keeping her distance, focused on her work. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. He began to speak, without looking directly at her, about the weight of carrying responsibilities too early, about expectations he never asked for, about the feeling of failing even when no one is watching. She listened in silence, surprised. No one had ever opened up to her like that before. When she responded, she spoke little, but truthfully. She said that failure for her had always been waking up and continuing even when no one believes you can go further. That conversation changed everything, not because it was long, but because it was honest. From then on, he began to seek her out, not as the owner of the company, but as someone who wanted to listen. He asked about her day, about her family, about dreams she had almost forgotten still existed. She gradually began to allow herself to answer without fear, without the armor of invisibility that protected her. There were never any promises, nor hasty invitations. Just conversations that happened at the right pace, respecting the different worlds that still separated them. But the building wasn't just made up of silent corridors. Stares began to appear. Overly suggestive comments, whispers, judgments disguised as professional concern. She felt it first. She felt the weight of being observed, analyzed, reduced to the function she performed. One day, she decided to distance herself. She passed him in the corridor without stopping, answered curtly, avoided encounters. He noticed immediately. He sought her out, asked if she had done something wrong. She took a deep breath before answering. She said that that kind of approach always ends with someone hurt, and that she couldn't afford to lose her job over something she couldn't even name. He listened without interrupting. He didn't try to convince her. He simply said that he understood her fear and that he didn't want to be another risk in her life. That sincere response disarmed everything. Days later, he made a decision that no one expected. He gathered leaders, managers, and employees and announced simple but profound changes, training on respect, real listening channels, and valuing all sectors. He didn't mention names. He didn't explain personal motivations. But he made it clear that no one would be invisible within that company. She watched everything from afar, unsure if it had anything to do with her, but she felt for the first time that something was changing. A few weeks later, he called her to talk outside the building in a small, simple cafe, away from prying eyes and hierarchies. There, without titles, without positions, without haste, he said what needed to be said. He said he didn't see her as a cleaning lady, nor as someone who needed saving. He saw her as a strong, dignified woman who had made him see his own humanity. He said he didn't know where this could lead, but that he wanted to try with respect, patience, and truth. She hesitated before answering. She glanced at the coffee on the table, remembering their first meeting, the stained floor, the stifled tears. When she finally spoke, she said she didn't need grand promises, just someone who would continue to see her even when it was easier to ignore her. He nodded. It was there, in that simple gesture, that love truly began, not like a fairy tale, but as a daily choice. And as they left the cafe, walking side by side, it became clear that that encounter in the hallway hadn't been an accident. It was the beginning of a story where two worlds didn't mix by chance, but because both decided to look beyond what had always been imposed. And if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone you love. Click now to share it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories we're preparing with great care for you.